scientific research and discovery in respect, as we should, we must also be alert to the equal and opposite danger that public policy should itself become the captive of a scientific, technological elite.
We've signed a climate convention on the importance of economic instruments and free markets. Were included in this mammoth Agenda 21 document and the Rio Declaration. Let me be clear on one fundamental point. The United States fully intends to be the world's preeminent leader in protecting the global environment.
Coming up, Technocracy News. And greetings to this broadcast. Patrick Wood here, Editor-in-Chief of Technocracy News and Trends. Today is July 30, 2019. Just one day left in this month. I want to make one fundamental point perfectly clear, like George Bush Sr. did just a moment ago. And I want to state that sustainable development scientists have no idea of how many resources the Earth truly has. When the science is lacking, why, let's speculate. Let's just make up some numbers. Let's use circular reasoning to work at it backwards. Figure out how much CO2 is in the air. How many people have been doing things that go against their dogma of sustainable development. Well, this is exactly what's happened, in my opinion, with the so-called day when the Earth ran out of resources. It's been declared to be July 29 of this year. That was yesterday. And this article starts out by saying on July 29, humanity will have used nature's resource budget for the entire year, according to the Global Footprint Network, an international sustainability organization that has pioneered the ecological footprint. It is Earth Overshoot Day. That's what they call it, Earth Overshoot Day. Its date has moved up 2 months for the past 20 years to the 29th of July this year, the earliest date ever. The Earth Overshoot Day falling on July 29 means that humanity is currently using nature 1.75 times faster than our planet's ecosystems can regenerate. This is akin to using 1.75 Earths. Overshoot is possible because we are depleting our natural capital, which compromises humanity's future resource security. The cost of this global ecological overspending are becoming increasingly evident in the form of deforestation, soil erosion, biodiversity loss, or the building up of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. The latter leads to climate change and more frequent extreme weather events. The co-inventor of ecological footprint accounting and founder of Global Footprint Network says, quote, "We've only got one Earth. This is the ultimately defining context for human existence. We can't use 1.75 without destructive consequences." Another so-called expert says, quote, "With Earth Overshoot Day occurring even earlier in the year, and a big part of it being the growing amount of CO2 emissions, the importance of decisive action is becoming ever more evident. For this reason, we're working with all parties to find effective approaches." My friends, you just can't make this stuff up. Sustainable development has spawned an entire industry of speculators and falsifiers of information. When I was in the first grade in grade school, many years ago now, one of the very first things that our teacher did was bring in a little cup, put some dirt in it and a bean, and we poured a little water on it. And she said, "I want you to watch this little plant now for the next few weeks to see what it does. And I want you to record in a journal everything you see and notice." And of course, after a few days of watering the little bean, it came up. It poked its little head through the ground, and it started to grow. And we set the little cups next to the window so that it could get some light. And the teacher explained all about photosynthesis and how plants, green plants, take the sunlight combined with carbon dioxide in the air, and they grow. And if you take away the sunlight, the plant won't grow. If you take away carbon dioxide, the plant won't grow. You put them together, the plant does grow. We took this as a self-evident truth from day one in school. Carbon dioxide is not a poisonous gas. The only reason you can call it a greenhouse gas is because when commercial farmers build greenhouses, the first thing they do is install CO2 concentrators to increase the CO2 level within the greenhouse so that plants will grow faster. Well, that was a good thing. That increases their bottom line, increases their production, gives them larger produce than they would have had any other way. Farmers know, they understand. And yet these people who likely have never, ever been on a farm or in a commercial greenhouse or anywhere else have declared unilaterally that carbon dioxide is bad for the earth. Well, if you want to see bad for the earth, just take out half the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and see what happens to food production in the world. That's right, it will crater. Maybe not by 50%, but it will crater. These sustainable development technocrats have absolutely no idea how many resources the earth has to serve mankind, but that just won't stop them from telling you that they know, and secondly, that you have overshot your annual quota. Shame on you. This madness just has to stop at some point. The second story shows a little madness as well. The headline is Japan, human-animal chimeras are on the fast track. Supporters say research could be vital first step towards growing organs that can be then transplanted into people in need. Human-animal hybrids are to be developed in embryo form in Japan after the government approved controversial stem cell research. Human cells will be grown in rat and mouse embryos, then brought to term in a surrogate animal as part of experiments set to be carried out at the University of Tokyo. Supporters say the work, led by renowned geneticist Hiromitsu Nakuchi, could be a vital first step toward eventually growing organs that can then be transplanted into people in need. But opponents have raised concerns that scientists are playing God. Well, isn't that the truth? The United States is already 4 years ahead of Japan in creating human-animal hybrids like this. They achieve it by injecting human stem cells into animal embryos. And I can only say that technocrat scientists invent because they can, not because there is a moral imperative to do so. The initial stages of a project like this, by the way, are always declared to be benign. There's some big carrot ahead of it that will drive these people on for a time. In this case, it's like, well, we need to grow human organs in order to transplant into people so they won't die. And that certainly sounds like a noble aspiration. And it may be. But the point is, where do you stop and limit the technology? And where do you stop and limit the labs that are working on these genetic experiments? Will they begin to cross other animals that have no possibility of creating human organs? Will they be creating other types of hybrids where the purpose is altogether different? Well, only time will tell. But if history is a guide, these things never end well. And indeed, every person that reads this article will have to decide for themselves, are these scientists really playing God? I think so. The last story is quite incredible. This one kind of snuck up on us, I believe. I'll raise the question here. How much annual spending do you think that the world is making on sustainable development today? That is green investments. Green investments. Well, the Brookings Institution has come out with a new study. And the title of this article is Brookings Global Spending on SDGs, that is, the Sustainable Development Goals, now exceeds $20 trillion annually. My comments at the top of this article: sustainable development is rapidly degrading capitalism and free enterprise with massive malinvestment to realize the Utopia-based 17 sustainable development goals specified by the UN's 2030 agenda. That's where it came from. I note that Ludwig von Mises wrote many years ago about malinvestment. Malinvestment is a mistaken investment and wrong lines of production, which inevitably lead to wasted capital and economic losses. He further went on to say that malinvestment is what causes booms and bubbles. And we look around today in the world wondering, where are all these booms and bubbles coming from? It's not just a matter of monetary policy. If this theory is correct, we can't simply blame the Federal Reserve System or any other central bank system in the world for the conditions that we see all over the world, not just in America. If von Mises was correct, the booms and bubbles are coming from malinvestment, And now we can really see that perhaps because we know that spending of $20 trillion a year is essentially going down a rat hole. Of course, the companies that are trading with themselves are making a fortune. People on the ground are not making a fortune. It's costing them more money every year. Everywhere green anything shows up in a city or in a rural area, prices start going up, not down. So we know the people aren't getting the benefit of this investment. Nevertheless, it's happening. It's throwing an awful lot of money around the global economic stage. So their study starts out and says pouring several colors of paint into a single bucket produces a gray pool of muck, not a shiny rainbow. So too with discussions of financing the Sustainable Development Goals, that is SDGs. Jumbling too many issues into the same debate leads to policy muddiness rather than practical breakthrough. Financing the SDGs requires a much more disaggregated mindset, unpacking the specific issues, requiring specific resources in specific places. In a forthcoming paper, we zoom out on the global SDG financing landscape in order to zoom back in on country-specific contexts and gaps. In particular, we consider how much the world's governments are already spending on SDG-related issues every year, how spending varies across income levels, and how the spending patterns link to country-by-country estimates of needs. We focus on the public sector due to its lead responsibility for tackling both public goods and the, quote, no one left behind, close quote, issues embedded in the SDGs, and the 2015 Addis Ababa Action Agenda on financing for development, the latter including a social compact commitment to provide universal access to basic services. This research can be considered as complementary to assessments of where the private sector can best contribute to SDG financing. Below, we summarize some of these preliminary findings, noting that all results are subject to refinement as we complete the analysis. Point number one, they note that global public sector SDG spending is already more than $20 trillion per year. Point number two, SDG spending rises proportionally with GDP per capita. That's gross domestic product. That's a measure of economic activity. Point number three says that minimum SDG spending needs are approximately $300 per capita. Point number four says that financing gaps vary by income level and by country. Point number five says that three substantial opportunities to fill the financial gaps. In other words, the world is looking for even more money to invest into green projects that will bring about sustainable development. The competition between sustainable development and capitalism and free enterprise is becoming more acute. The United Nations has already sworn to destroy capitalism and free enterprise and replace it with sustainable development. The two economic systems are completely opposite. They're like matter and antimatter. Wherever they meet, corruption sets in, gangrene sets in, and the patient dies. But what's happening now on a global level, mostly because of the global corporations that are investing in so-called green technology, now we know this amount of $20 trillion per year is working to undermine capitalism and free enterprise. And according to existing economic theory, this spending is malinvestment. It's put into the wrong place. The definition again is malinvestment is a mistaken investment in wrong lines of production, which inevitably lead to wasted capital and economic losses. And we wonder as we look around why the world is in such bad shape. There's a facade of economic prosperity. But as you look closer at that facade, basically what you see are bubbles and booms. And I think now we may know why these bubbles are taking place. I suggest we stop blaming the Federal Reserve and monetary policy for the economic dislocations in America and rather look at this $20 trillion per year that's being spent foolishly on trying to develop the United Nations utopian goals called the Sustainable Development Goals. And in the end of it, the United Nations is seeking to control all resources, all production, and all consumption. This is antithetical to capitalism and free enterprise, which relies on the free market. Allowing consumers to decide what they want drives production to meet those needs. Based on scarcity or lack of scarcity, the price may go up and down of a given good, but companies that watch public consumption know what they need to make. They see an opportunity and they move to fill it. Sustainable development will do no such thing. Sustainable development will tell you what you can make, and then it will tell you what you are allowed to consume. It wants complete control over both sides of the transaction. In other words, over the entire economy. And instead of having an economy based on supply and demand and based on currency, it will be centered and focused on energy instead. In other words, energy will be the accounting system that keeps track of all of the assets and other things that belong to the green economy. The Brookings Institution, by the way, is an old-line global elite organization. They were closely associated with the Trilateral Commission in the 1970s. But in this case, they've done us a favor, at least, by bringing this statistic to the surface to show us exactly how much money is being spent on an annual basis. They do not talk about the effects of it or the dislocations that are happening because of it, but nevertheless, it gives us a keen insight into some of the other things that are taking place in the world. I'm Patrick Wood for Technocracy News and Trends. Have a great day.